The sun was shining gently over the local park that afternoon, giving everything a warm golden glow. Families were spread across the grassy areas, some sitting on blankets enjoying snacks, while children ran around laughing and shouting in excitement. The air was filled with the sound of birds chirping and water softly lapping at the edge of the small lake that sat in the heart of the park. It was the kind of day where everything seemed peaceful, almost perfect, and for many it was an ordinary, relaxing weekend. Near the edge of the lake, a young boy no older than 7 was crouched down, focused on feeding a group of ducks that had gathered near the shore. His small hands held pieces of bread which he carefully tossed toward the quacking birds. He giggled every time a duck swooped closer than the others, stretching its neck to get a crumb. There was something pure and innocent in the way he was completely absorbed in this little activity. Parents nearby watched fondly, some pointing to their own children, showing them how to do the same. Not far from the boy, a local police officer was making his rounds. He was a tall man, wearing the standard dark blue uniform with the badge glinting in the sunlight. To most people he appeared calm and professional, but there was a tension in his eyes, a seriousness that didn't quite match the playful atmosphere of the park. It wasn't that he disliked being there. He just seemed hyper-focused on keeping everything in order. That afternoon he was particularly alert, perhaps overly so, watching every movement around the water. Every child who strayed too close to the edge. The boy, completely unaware of the officer's watchful eyes, continued feeding the ducks. His little feet shuffled as he leaned forward, reaching out to place more bread on the water. The ducks quacked loudly, jostling for position, and the boy laughed in delight. At that moment, the officer misread the situation. He saw the boy leaning over the water, and in a split second, his mind raced with a worry that perhaps the child might fall in or get hurt. The thought of a tragedy in the middle of a sunny afternoon made his chest tighten. Without thinking fully, the officer took a step closer. "Hey, be careful," he shouted, but it came too late. His caution, meant as a warning, turned into an action that no one expected. With a sudden movement, he reached out and pushed the boy toward the lake. The child let out a startled cry, losing his balance completely. In a matter of seconds, he tumbled forward and splashed into the shallow water. The quiet, peaceful park instantly erupted into chaos. People nearby gasped and shouted. Some parents sprinted toward the lake, their hearts racing, while others froze for a moment, unsure how to react. The sound of water splashing mixed with the boy's frightened cries created a wave of panic that spread quickly through the small crowd. The officer, standing just behind the child, froze as well, his face pale and eyes wide. He hadn't expected the push to look so harsh, to make the child actually fall. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words that could explain or undo what had just happened. The boy struggled in the water, coughing and flailing his small arms. His little legs kicked, trying to find balance on the uneven, slippery lake bed. He was scared, tears welling up in his eyes, but luckily the water wasn't deep. Still, the moment felt dangerous and terrifying, especially for the onlookers. A mother nearby grabbed her own child and pulled her back, holding her tight while whispering reassurances. Another man who had been walking his dog ran closer, calling for the child to stay calm. Every second felt long, like an eternity, as the boy tried to stand up, shaking and shivering from the shock of the sudden fall. The officer took a hesitant step forward, his hands raised in a gesture that seemed almost apologetic. It's okay," he stammered, but his words did little to calm the growing tension. Some people in the crowd shouted at him, asking why he had pushed the boy in the first place. Their voices were a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. The moment was raw, real, and full of emotion. Parents' protective instincts had kicked in, and the officer could feel the weight of their eyes, full of judgment and concern. While the scene unfolded, the boy's attention was fixed on staying upright and making sure he didn't fall further into the water. He held onto a small patch of grass sticking out of the ground, pulling himself closer to the shore. His little hands were shaking and his face was wet, not just from the water but from the tears streaming down his cheeks. It was clear that he was frightened, confused, and overwhelmed, yet somehow he kept trying to stay calm. There was a quiet bravery in his struggle, a determination to get back to safety despite the sudden chaos. Other children in the park watched from a distance, some crying, others clinging to their parents. The peaceful afternoon had turned into a scene of panic, and the laughter that had filled the air just moments ago was gone. Birds scattered from the water, startled by the commotion, while the ducks flapped noisily and waddled away. The contrast between the serenity before and the panic now was stark, making the incident feel even more dramatic. Among the crowd, whispers began spreading, questions about the officer, about what had happened, and about who would help the child first. People's phones were already out, some recording the moment while others were calling for help. The tension was palpable, but underneath it all, there was a shared hope that someone would step forward. Someone would make sure the boy was safe and calm. The officer's face reflected regret as he looked at the boy. His eyes darted around the park, seeing the crowd of worried parents and children, realizing that a simple act meant to prevent harm had caused chaos instead. For the first time that afternoon, he felt completely powerless, watching as the boy struggled in the water and feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The sun still shone, but it felt different now, almost mocking in its brightness compared to the tension and fear in the park. Just as the situation seemed to hang in a delicate balance, a few bystanders moved closer to help. An older man reached out his hand, trying to guide the boy to the shore, while a teenage girl shouted encouragements, telling him to hold on. Their voices were calm yet urgent, filled with care and concern. The boy responded to their presence, gripping the older man's hand and letting himself be pulled gently toward the edge of the lake. Slowly but surely, he started to regain his footing, the fear in his eyes slowly giving way to cautious relief. Even as the boy reached the edge, the officer remained frozen for a few moments longer. The shock of seeing his actions create such fear weighed heavily on him. Around him, the crowd began murmuring, some in anger, some in relief, and others still in shock. The boy's small form finally stood on solid ground, soaked and trembling, but safe. Parents rushed to comfort him, wrapping him in jackets and towels, whispering kind words, rubbing his back and wiping away the tears. The moment was raw and emotional, full of humanity, fear, and relief all at once. The scene captured the full attention of everyone in the park. Conversations began immediately, expressing concern for the child, questioning the officer, and praising the quick reactions of the bystanders who helped. Even amidst the chaos, the sense of community was clear. Strangers came together, pulled by the instinct to protect a child in danger. The boy, though scared, looked up at the crowd, his small eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion, fear, and growing understanding that he was safe now. At that point, something unexpected was about to happen, something no one in the park could have anticipated. The ordinary afternoon, the sudden chaos, and the shock of the incident were about to take a turn that would change the story completely. But for now, the focus remained on the boy, standing wet and shivering on the shore, surrounded by concerned faces as the officer watched with a mix of shame and disbelief. It was a moment suspended in time, a moment where fear, innocence, and the first stirrings of hope all existed together. The crowd was still buzzing with worry and shock, their eyes fixed on the little boy, soaked from the sudden fall into the lake. Parents clutched their children tightly, and murmurs spread across the park like a gentle wave, each whisper filled with concern and curiosity. People were looking for someone, anyone, to take control of the situation, to make sure the boy was safe and calm. In that moment, as chaos swirled around the edge of the lake, two figures appeared in the distance, walking briskly toward the scene. They were tall, imposing, and instantly recognizable. One had a broad, muscular frame moving with purpose and confidence, while the other had a smile that seemed to radiate warmth and calm, even in the midst of panic. The crowd began to notice them, whispering excitedly among themselves. "Is that—" someone murmured. "It can't be," another said. But there was no mistaking them. John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson were walking straight toward the lake, and they looked ready to help. The boy, still shivering and wide-eyed, didn't notice them at first. His attention was on the officer who had stepped back, unsure how to respond, and on the handful of bystanders trying to offer comfort. He clutched the jacket a nearby parent had wrapped around him, shivering slightly, his small chest rising and falling rapidly with nervous breaths. The moment was tense, a mixture of fear, relief, and confusion. Cena was the first to arrive. Without a moment's hesitation, he scanned the scene, quickly assessing the situation. His eyes locked on the boy, and he didn't wait for anyone to give instructions. He knelt down, extending his strong, reassuring hands toward the child. "Hey there, little man, it's okay," he said in a calm, gentle voice that carried both authority and kindness. "You're safe now. Let's get you out of the water." The boy looked up, blinking through his tears. At first he hesitated, unsure if he could trust anyone after the sudden push that had thrown him into the lake. But there was something in Cena's eyes, something steady and patient that made him feel a little braver. Slowly, he reached out his tiny hands, letting Cena guide him carefully out of the water. Each step back to solid ground was careful, deliberate, with Cena supporting him firmly, making sure he wouldn't slip again. Meanwhile, The Rock had stepped in to manage the crowd. His voice boomed with calm authority, yet it carried warmth that put everyone at ease. "Step back a little, everyone. Give the boy some space," he said. People obeyed instinctively, moving back and creating a small circle around the child. He smiled at them, nodding encouragingly, letting them know that the situation was under control now. His presence alone seemed to calm the rising tension, turning fear into cautious relief. By the time Cena had guided the boy completely out of the water, wrapped him in a dry towel, and made sure he was steady on his feet, the crowd had grown silent with awe. Parents whispered to each other, amazed at how these two strangers who happened to be famous had stepped in with such calm and efficiency. It wasn't just their fame that drew attention. It was the way they treated the child with patience and care, without a hint of showmanship. Every action was focused on the boy's safety and comfort. The boy, though still trembling, began to calm down a little. Cena crouched to meet him at eye level, speaking softly, trying to make him feel safe. "It's all right," he said again. "You're okay now. Those ducks aren't going to hurt you and no one is going to push you again." The child looked at him, then at The Rock, and finally allowed himself a small, nervous smile. For the first time since the incident began, a sense of relief began to settle over him. The officer, who had watched the entire scene unfold, seemed almost frozen. He wasn't used to seeing people respond with such immediate care and courage. Seeing the celebrities handle the situation, guiding the child safely and managing the crowd, he felt a mix of shame and awe. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, making him realize just how reckless his initial action had been. He stepped back further, unsure what to do next, feeling both relief that the boy was safe and guilt for causing the chaos in the first place. Meanwhile, bystanders began to murmur, pointing out the celebrities and their actions. Phones were raised, capturing the moment from every angle. People whispered excitedly, taking in the unexpected turn of events. What started as a frightening incident had suddenly become something remarkable, something that no one in the park would ever forget. Parents exchanged looks, their children still clinging to them, wide-eyed and curious, witnessing the extraordinary scene play out before them. Cena stayed close to the boy, helping him dry off and reassuring him. "You're very brave," he said, ruffling the child's wet hair gently. Not everyone could handle that so well. The boy giggled softly, the fear in his eyes beginning to fade. He looked around, noticing the crowd giving him space and the officer standing quietly to the side. He realized that despite the scary moments, there were people who genuinely cared for him, people who had come to help without hesitation. The Rock, meanwhile, moved through the crowd, checking that other children were safe and that parents were reassured. His calm demeanor and commanding presence turned what could have been chaos into a controlled environment. He spoke to people in short, clear sentences, making sure everyone understood what was happening and what to do. "Stay calm, give the boy space, and let's make sure no one else gets hurt," he said. People listened, following his guidance without question, their initial panic slowly giving way to a sense of order and relief. As the boy's breathing steadied and his small body began to warm up under the towel, Cena gave a small nod to The Rock. It was a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that the immediate danger had passed. Both men had acted without hesitation, and the result was clear. The child was safe, and the situation had been diffused before it could escalate further. Parents began approaching cautiously, thanking Cena and The Rock for their help. Their voices were filled with gratitude, some nearly trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much," one mother said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." The Rock smiled and shook his head modestly. "We're just glad he's okay," he said simply. Cena echoed the sentiment, crouching once more to offer a comforting word to the boy, letting him know he had nothing to fear. The boy's parents finally arrived at the scene, rushing through the crowd with anxious expressions. Their eyes widened as they saw their child safe and surrounded by two of the most recognizable figures in the world. Relief washed over them, mixed with awe and gratitude. They hugged their child tightly, whispering soothing words while casting thankful glances towards Cena and the rock. The child clung to his parents, feeling a mix of safety and wonder, knowing he had been protected in a way that seemed almost unreal. Even the officer seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. He approached slowly, keeping his distance, and said, I didn't mean for this to happen." His voice was low, tinged with regret. Cena looked at him, nodding slightly, but did not say much. The rock stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on the officer's shoulder. "Learn from this," he said simply. "Make sure it never happens again. Right now, focus on making things right." The officer nodded silently, absorbing the lesson in humility and responsibility that the moment demanded. As the crowd began to settle, a sense of calm returned to the park. Children resumed playing, though some still cast curious glances at the lake. Parents stayed closer to their children, whispering reassurances, but the overwhelming panic had faded. The boy, now fully safe and dry, held his parents' hands tightly, looking up at Cena and the rock with admiration and a hint of awe. It was a memory he would never forget, the moment when strangers who turned out to be heroes stepped in to protect him. The story of that afternoon would travel quickly. People in the park were already recording snippets on their phones, sharing videos and photos online. Comments of praise, astonishment, and relief began pouring in from viewers who had never even been there. What could have been a frightening and negative story was now turning into a story of courage, humanity, and unexpected heroes stepping forward at the perfect moment. By the time Cena and the rock stepped back, ensuring the boy was fully with his parents, the park had settled into a quieter rhythm. Families resumed picnics, children cautiously approached the lake again, and the sun continued to shine warmly overhead. But the memory of what had happened lingered in everyone's minds. The sudden fear, the quick reactions, and the two figures who had turned panic into safety. The boy clutched his mother's hand as he looked back one last time. "Thank you," he whispered softly, almost to himself. Cena smiled, crouching briefly to offer a final nod. "Anytime, buddy. Stay safe," he said. The rock gave a thumbs up, his large smile reassuring and kind. For the boy and everyone watching, it was a moment of real, human heroism, one that would be remembered long after the sun had set and the park had emptied. The sun had started to dip slightly toward the horizon, casting long, warm shadows across the park. The excitement of the earlier incident had gradually settled, but the impact of what had happened lingered in the air. People were still talking in small groups, pointing to the area near the lake, replaying the moment in their minds. The boy, now wrapped safely in a towel, sat close to his parents, who kept their arms around him protectively. Though his small hands had dried and his shivers had calmed, his wide eyes still reflected a mix of awe and confusion over what had just happened. News of the incident had spread almost instantly. Someone in the crowd had captured the entire scene on their phone, the officer pushing the boy, the startled splash into the lake, and then the swift, heroic arrival of John Cena and the Rock. Within minutes, the video began circulating online. Social media platforms buzzed with activity, as viewers from across the country watched in shock and amazement. Comments ranged from outrage at the officer's actions to admiration for the two celebrities who had intervened so quickly. The local community, small but tightly knit, quickly mobilized. Parents called each other to check on their children. Friends shared the video across messaging apps, and community groups began discussing the incident. "I can't believe a police officer would push a child like that," one mother said, shaking her head in disbelief. "But those men, Cena and the Rock, they saved him. I've never seen anything like it." People nodded, agreeing, and the conversation turned from shock to gratitude, marveling at how the situation had been handled. At the same time, the police department faced a sudden wave of scrutiny. The officer involved had been identified, and questions began to circulate about why he had acted so abruptly. Many community members expressed frustration, demanding accountability and transparency. The department quickly released a statement, acknowledging the incident and promising a full review. "We take this matter very seriously," the statement read. "The safety of children in our community is our top priority. An internal investigation will be conducted, and appropriate actions will be taken." Meanwhile, the boy's family tried to process everything that had happened. They were deeply shaken by the suddenness of the event, yet incredibly grateful that their child had not been hurt. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering reassuring words, while his father inspected the towel, making sure it was dry enough to keep him warm. "You're safe now," his father said softly. "That's all that matters." The boy clutched their hands, still trying to understand the whirlwind of chaos and heroism that had unfolded around him. The presence of John Cena and The Rock had not gone unnoticed by the community either. People admired how naturally they had stepped in without hesitation. They hadn't asked for recognition, nor had they sought attention, they had simply acted. "It's amazing," a local teenager said, still holding their phone with the video paused. "They didn't just stand there, they saved the boy and they handled the crowd too. They were calm and everyone listened to them." There was a sense of pride among the locals that the moment had been handled with courage and compassion, even if the circumstances had been frightening. The boy, after a few moments of calming down, began to speak, his small voice breaking the silence. I didn't like it," he admitted, glancing at the officer who stood nearby, his head slightly bowed. "I was scared." His mother hugged him closer, rubbing his back gently. "It's okay, honey. It's over now," she whispered. "You're safe and people were there to help you." The boy nodded, his wide eyes flicking toward Cena and The Rock one last time. "They were nice," he said softly. "They helped me." His parents smiled, feeling the relief wash over them. The officer, meanwhile, struggled with his own emotions. He had never intended to harm the child, yet the consequences of his actions were clear. Seeing the boy's fear, the parents' concern, and the community's reaction weighed heavily on him. He felt ashamed and remorseful, realizing that his attempt to maintain order had gone terribly wrong. He quietly moved to the side, allowing others to take over, and began reflecting on how he could learn from the mistake. Social media attention continued to grow. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting both the frightening incident and the remarkable response from Cena and The Rock. Headlines read, "Child pushed into lake by officers saved by quick-thinking celebrities," and "Unexpected heroes step in to protect child after scary incident." Videos circulated widely, with people praising the celebrities for their calm and caring actions. Online communities discussed the importance of quick thinking, compassion, and accountability in public spaces, turning the story into a broader conversation about responsibility. Local schools also began to take notice. Teachers and administrators discussed the incident with students in age-appropriate ways, emphasizing lessons about safety near water, the importance of being cautious, and how to respond if someone is in danger. Children learned that accidents can happen quickly, but that remaining calm and seeking help from trusted adults can make all the difference. The story became a teaching moment, one that extended far beyond the park that afternoon. The boy's parents decided to speak publicly about the incident, not to seek attention, but to highlight the importance of community vigilance and care. They expressed gratitude for those who had helped, especially the celebrities, while also addressing the need for accountability. "Our son was very lucky," his mother said in a quiet, emotional voice. "It could have been much worse, but thanks to the people who stepped in, he's safe. We hope this reminds everyone to watch over their children and act with kindness and responsibility." Meanwhile, the officer faced discussions with the police department about his actions. It was clear that there would be consequences, and he had to come to terms with both the professional and personal implications of what had happened. Internal reviews focused on training, judgment, and the importance of public safety, particularly when it involved vulnerable children. Though the officer felt remorse, he understood that this moment could also serve as a lesson for others in similar positions of authority. Through all the media attention and community discussions, the boy slowly began to feel safe again. He was no longer trembling or frightened, though he carried the memory of the incident in his mind. The warmth and kindness he had experienced from Cena and The Rock stayed with him, a reminder that courage and compassion can appear unexpectedly, even in moments of fear. His parents encouraged him to talk about his feelings, helping him process what had happened while also celebrating the fact that he had been rescued safely. By the evening, the park had returned to a quieter rhythm. Families were leaving, children holding hands with parents, and the air felt lighter once more. Yet the story of the incident had already taken on a life of its own. People continued to discuss it, replaying the videos online and sharing their thoughts on how courage, Quick thinking and care for others can change the outcome of frightening situations. Cena and The Rock, though no longer physically present, had left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed the event. The incident had sparked conversations about safety, responsibility, and heroism that went far beyond that single afternoon. People talked about the importance of community, about being ready to help when someone is in danger, and about how small acts of courage can have a profound impact. Families shared the story with friends and neighbors, emphasizing the lessons learned, while the wider public debated the balance between authority and compassion. Even the children in the park, though younger and less able to articulate their feelings, absorbed the lesson. They watched the adults around them, learning from the way the situation had been handled. They saw courage, responsibility, and the power of calm action, and in small ways they carried those lessons with them. It was a moment that blended fear, relief, and awe, shaping how they understood the world around them. For the boys' family, the incident became a story of both caution and gratitude. They remained thankful that their child had not been seriously harmed, and they were inspired by the heroes who had stepped forward. The boy himself, though still processing the emotions, began to feel a sense of pride and resilience. He had survived a frightening moment, and he had been surrounded by people who cared deeply about his well-being. By the end of the day, the park was nearly empty. Streetlights flickered on, casting soft light across the paths, and the water of the lake reflected the fading colors of the sunset. Families headed home, carrying memories of a day that had started normally but had turned extraordinary. The story of the incident, and of the unexpected heroes who had appeared, would continue to spread, reminding everyone of the importance of courage, empathy, and quick action in times of crisis. And while the boy would eventually grow older and the specifics of the incident might fade slightly in his memory, the feelings of safety, relief, and wonder, the knowledge that people could step up to protect him, would remain forever. It was a story about humanity, about people coming together, and about how, even in the midst of fear, kindness and bravery could shine through. Days passed since the incident at the park, but the story didn't fade from the community's mind. Parents continued to talk about what had happened, replaying the moments in their heads, the sudden fear, the child's cries, and the heroic intervention of John Cena and The Rock. It had become more than just a frightening moment. It was now a story about courage, responsibility, and the ways ordinary and extraordinary people could step in to help someone in danger. The boy's family was still shaken but slowly finding comfort. Every time they walked past the lake, the memory of that day surfaced along with gratitude for the people who had intervened. His mother would often hold his hand a little tighter, quietly reminding herself and him to be careful. His father made sure to speak about the event calmly, explaining that sometimes accidents happen, but what mattered most was staying safe and seeking help when needed. They talked about the bravery of the strangers who had helped, teaching the boy about kindness and courage in the process. Meanwhile, the police department had completed its initial review of the incident. The officer involved had been placed on administrative leave, and discussions were underway regarding proper training and accountability. Internal meetings focused on how to prevent similar situations in the future, highlighting the importance of careful observation, communication, and restraint, especially when dealing with children. The officer, reflecting on his actions, recognized the consequences of a split-second decision. He admitted his mistake to his superiors and expressed a sincere desire to learn from the experience. Community members followed the story closely, often discussing it on social media or in local meetings. Many praised the officer for acknowledging his mistake and taking responsibility, while also emphasizing that prevention was key. Local parents held small gatherings in community centers to talk about child safety, sharing tips for keeping children safe near water and other potentially dangerous areas. The incident had sparked a valuable conversation about vigilance, care, and proactive measures to protect the young and vulnerable. The boys' experience became a teaching moment in schools as well. Teachers used the story to discuss safety rules with their students, framing it in a way that was understandable and non-frightening. Always be aware of your surroundings, one teacher explained. If you feel unsafe, call for help and don't be afraid to ask adults you trust. The children listened attentively, many remembering the video of the heroic celebrities helping the boy. It reinforced the lesson that courage and care could make a difference. even in frightening situations. For John Cena and The Rock, the incident had also left a lasting impression. Though they returned to their regular routines, they occasionally reflected on that afternoon. Both men had acted instinctively, guided by a simple desire to help someone in need. In interviews and public appearances later, they spoke about the importance of being present, aware, and willing to step up when someone's safety was at risk. They emphasized that anyone could be a hero in their own way, by staying calm, acting responsibly, and caring for others. The boys' parents, inspired by the actions they had witnessed, began thinking about how they could contribute to child safety in their own community. They considered organizing small workshops in local parks and schools, teaching children and parents alike about water safety and quick response in emergencies. They wanted the lessons from their experience to reach others, turning a frightening event into something constructive and positive. Their hope was that no other child in their town would ever have to face a similar situation without help nearby. Meanwhile, the officer took the opportunity to reflect deeply on his actions. He realized that his decision to push the child, even if unintentional, could have caused serious harm. He reached out to child safety experts and attended workshops on crisis management, learning ways to remain calm and assess situations before taking action. Over time, he began to rebuild trust with the community, showing that mistakes, when acknowledged and learned from, could lead to growth and better practices in the future. The community, in general, had grown closer because of the incident. Neighbors started looking out for each other more, keeping an eye on children in parks and sharing information about safety measures. Parents exchanged stories and tips, discussing how to prevent accidents and how to respond calmly if something went wrong. The collective experience strengthened their sense of responsibility and solidarity, creating a safer environment for everyone. For the boy himself, the days following the incident were filled with a mix of emotions. At times he felt nervous and hesitant near water, a natural reaction after such a sudden scare. But with encouragement from his parents and reminders of the heroes who had saved him, he gradually regained confidence. He began to approach small puddles and streams cautiously, testing his comfort with water little by little. Every step forward was celebrated quietly by his parents, a testament to resilience and the lessons learned from fear. The incident also sparked broader conversations about the role of authority in public spaces. Many people discussed the balance between protection and restraint, emphasizing that those entrusted with public safety must act with care, especially around children. The officer's acknowledgement of his mistake became a case study for local policymakers, highlighting the importance of training, accountability, and reflective practice. It was a reminder that actions, even with good intentions, must always consider the potential consequences. Social media continued to circulate videos and discussions about the event. While some focused on the shock of the initial push, many highlighted the calm and courageous intervention by Cena and The Rock. Their actions inspired others to share stories of small, everyday heroism, neighbors helping strangers, friends protecting each other, and communities stepping up in times of need. The narrative had evolved from a scary moment into a broader conversation about responsibility, empathy, and courage. The boy's family often revisited the park, cautiously observing the lake and the surroundings. Each visit became an opportunity to reinforce safety lessons with their child. They pointed out areas to avoid, explained the importance of staying close to parents, and highlighted the value of calm thinking during emergencies. Slowly, the boy's fear was replaced by awareness and confidence. He began to understand that accidents could happen, but the right actions and the support of others could prevent harm and turn fear into safety. Months passed, and the community continued to grow stronger. Local organizations began hosting workshops on child safety, inviting speakers to discuss water hazards, emergency responses, and the importance of responsible behavior. Parents actively participated, sharing their experiences and learning new strategies for keeping their children safe. The story of the boy, the officer, and the unexpected heroes became a recurring example, a real-life lesson that emphasized care, awareness, and empathy. The officer, too, gradually rebuilt his confidence and reputation. By taking responsibility, undergoing training, and engaging with the community, he showed that mistakes could be transformed into learning experiences. While the memory of the incident remained, it became a source of reflection rather than shame. He shared his story with colleagues and trainees, stressing the importance of patience, careful assessment, and the human impact of every action. Through it all, the boy's family remained grateful, not only for the immediate rescue, but also for the broader lessons learned. They shared their story with friends, neighbors, and even at school events, emphasizing how community support, courage, and accountability could make a real difference. The boy himself, though still young, began to grasp these lessons. He understood that fear could be overcome, that bravery existed in many forms, and that even ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they acted with care. Looking back, the incident had transformed from a moment of panic into a story of growth, understanding, and human connection. The park, once just a place of leisure, had become a symbol of awareness and safety. The boy, the officer, and the community had all learned valuable lessons, each in their own way. Courage, empathy, and responsibility had shown through, turning what could have been a negative memory into a lasting example of human decency and care. The actions of John Cena and The Rock remained at the heart of the story, a reminder that heroism often comes from acting quickly, calmly, and selflessly. Their presence had inspired the community to reflect on their own roles in protecting children and supporting one another. The lessons extended beyond the park, reaching homes, schools, and workplaces, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the willingness to act when needed. By the time the sun fully set and the park grew quiet again, the memory of that day had left a lasting mark. Parents watched their children a little more closely, neighbors looked out for each other, and the boy carried with him a mix of gratitude, awareness, and courage. It was a story that began with fear but ended with understanding, connection, and hope, a story that would continue to influence the community for years to come. Weeks passed after the incident at the park, and life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The lake, once the site of panic and fear, now glimmered peacefully in the sunlight, its gentle ripples reflecting the calm that had returned. Families continued to visit, children laughed and played, and parents watched closely, more aware than ever of the importance of supervision. Though the memory of the day lingered, the lessons learned had begun to shape the way people approached safety and responsibility. The boy, whose life had been briefly filled with fear, now carried with him a sense of resilience and awareness. He remembered the sudden push into the water, the panic that followed, and the feeling of hands helping him to safety. Even as he played near the lake now, he stayed close to his parents, more cautious and mindful of his surroundings. His parents encouraged him gently, explaining that while accidents could happen, knowing how to respond and having others to help could turn even frightening situations into safe ones. The officer who had pushed the boy was no longer on active duty at the park. He had spent the past weeks undergoing training on child safety, crisis management, and the importance of measured responses. Each day brought reflection and understanding, as he came to realize that even small actions could have significant consequences. He spoke with mentors, attended workshops, and slowly regained confidence in his role, determined to ensure that no similar incident would occur in the future. Though the guilt of that day never completely disappeared, he channeled it into a commitment to improve and learn. Meanwhile, the community had grown closer through the shared experience. Parents, neighbors, and local organizations worked together to create a safer environment for children. Workshops were held in schools and community centers to educate both adults and kids on safety near water, emergency response, and awareness in public spaces. The story of the boy and the heroic intervention by John Cena and The Rock became a guiding example, emphasizing the importance of calm, quick thinking, and